We're going to be looking at the creation process for another interactive HR dashboard. This particular one is for HR dashboard for ABC Company LLC. The various features of this dashboard is critical in creating them from scratch. And the various components, as you can see displayed, is the workforce age distribution as a chart, workforce length of service as a chart, the workforce recruitment sources as a chart as well. Then the workforce hiring trend. You notice a combination of different charts here. We have a bar chart, which is for the workforce length of service. We have a column chart for the workforce age distribution. We have a workforce recruitment sources that is represented as a pie chart. Then we have a line graph that shows the hiring trend over a period of time. Those are four different charts that are actually pivot charts that are created out of four different pivot tables. Then in addition, we have pivot tables are also here, one showing the key metrics, workforce head count, average age, gender, and also job grade. Then this particular one here is a slicer that makes it dynamic. This slicer is connected to the three pivot chart tables you can see and the four different pivot charts on the screen. So if I filter through using that slicer, you could see that there will be changes in the data in each of the other parts of the dashboard. This is what makes it an interactive HR dashboard. Now, all of this entire dashboard was created from the employee or workforce data that is available in the resources section of this course. Remember to download it so that you can follow me as I go into the step-by-step process of creating this particular dashboard that you can see. So let's get right into it now. So this is the Excel file. This is the practice file that we'll be using for this particular exercise. And the various sections are the various fields in the data. We have the employee ID, gender, hire date. These are already processed data expressed as Excel tables. There are calculations in there to get the age, the distribution, the length of service range, and the additional information here is the department, job grade, recruitment sources, and performance rating. Now, in order for us to be able to create that dashboard, in order for us to get to the final stage of this particular dashboard, we will take it step by step. We will need to create four different pivot charts created out of pivot tables tied to the workforce data we're working with, then three additional pivot tables that display each of the metrics here. Then the final stage is adding the slicer. In order to create each of those pivot tables, we would create a new worksheet, and let's label this new worksheet dashboard. We'll label it dashboard. I'll take it to the front of the chart. Then I would start to create the key metrics, workforce, workforce head count, average age, and I'll create them here. Now, in order to do that, I'll go to the main data, which is expressed as the Excel table already. I'll click on table design and I will use summarize with pivot table. Now, I'm going to be using two different functionality here. We will using a new worksheet and also using an existing worksheet. Now, since I want to create this pivot table on an existing worksheet that I've labeled dashboard, I will pick existing worksheet. Then I will indicate the location and I will click OK. Now, so in order for me to do that, what I need is that I need a workforce head count, I need the average age, and I also need the average length of service. So all we're going to be working with, I'll put employee ID under values. I would also add the age under values as well, and I'll also add the length of service under values. So immediately that is all three has been added to values. I would bring the values tab and put it under rows. Now this is well represented. Remember, I can now start to do some customization, very similar to what we've done earlier. And I will be now This time around, I'll click on this values field and convert that to average. Do the same thing for length of service, values field, average. In order to adjust some formatting, I would go to pivot table options, then auto fits, such that when I do edit and all of that can be recollected. Then I can now reduce this, change the number format for that. I'll change the number format to take away the decimals. I'll do the same thing for this other average for length of service. Number, take away the decimal points. Then I can centralize this. I'll do some further edits on this labeling. Workforce average age. And also for the second one, workforce average length of service. For the sake of this, I can call it LOS, average length of service, just to reduce what I'm writing. Okay, so I have the first part of my dashboard. Then the next one is I'm going to put the gender distribution here, and I will put the job grade here as well. So I'll go back to my employee data. I would do exactly the same thing, go to table design and summarize with pivot table, existing worksheet. Then I go to the dashboard and I want to put the gender distribution there. Before I am done with this, so that this will not affect my conversation, I will remove auto fits. Then I can put gender under rows, employee ID under values. Then that summarizes that for me. Then I can do some further customization on the data. Then you'll notice that there's a repetition of the totals. We already have the workforce age here as 364. I'm going to take this out by going to our right click, pivot table options. Then I go to totals and I remove the totals, grand totals from each of the worksheets, so that it's now consistent with 364 here. I'll do another edit here and take that to count. And I can now centralize all of that so that everything works fine. So I'm done with the second pivot table. The next pivot table, I'm going to bring it here, which is going to show the job grades. Then I'll go back to my employee data, table design, and I'll do summarize with pivot table, existing worksheet again. Then I go to dashboard, then I drop, that's where I want the pivot table to go to. Do a quick edit as well, pivot table fields, auto fit, and I'll remove the totals as well, so that it will not show the total value for that particular worksheet. For that particular pivot table, it will not show the totals. Then I'll put job grade under rows, and employee ID under value. So that counts that. You notice it's not showing the total because I've already taken that out from the pivot table option. Then I'll rename this to job grade. Then I also rename this to counts. Then I can centralize all of this. So you notice the first part, the first three pivot table is now forming out. My dashboard is now forming out. Now the remaining part of my dashboard from the final result, as you can see, is this three pivot table has now been sorted out. I now have 4 different pivot charts to create from 4 different pivot tables. So let's get right into that. So in order to create the remaining 4 different pivot charts, we'll go back to the employee data. This time around, under the employee data, we'll go to pivot table, table design, and we would now use summarize pivot table. I've already used existing worksheet. This time around, I'm going to be using a new worksheet. So I'll click new worksheet and it will open a new worksheet. Rename this as pivots. So I'm going to be putting all the pivot tables I'm going to be needing here. Then I would create pivot chart out of the pivot tables and take them to the dashboard sheet that I have tab that I've already created. So for this particular one, I'm going to be doing the employee age distribution. That is the first part of the pivot charts. So the employee age distribution, this gives me the pivot table for the employee age distribution. What I need is to create a pivot chart out of this pivot table. I'll go to pivot table, analyze, then I'll go to pivot chart. Then I'm using a column chart. I will click on that column chart. All I need to do is to do further customization. So this time around, all I would do is to hide all field buttons on charts, take away the legend. I'll rename the pivot chart workforce age distribution. That is already sorted out. Then I will now move this. I'll move this chart to my dashboard. I'm going to do further customization. Remember, the dashboard must be contained in a single screen. So I'll bring everything back here once I create the other part of the other pivot charts, basically. So we're done with the first part of the workforce age. I'll go back to where my pivots are. And this time around, I'm going to create a new pivot table that would show the employee length of service distribution. So I'll go back to my employee data. Remember, from the employee data, you go to the table design. Since this has been created as a pivot table already, then I'll summarize the pivot chart. Then this time around, I'll pick existing worksheet again because I want all my pivots to be here. I will pick anywhere in there and I will create the second pivot chart. So I'll pick anywhere there, and this time around, this would help me to create my average length, my workforce length of service distribution. So this time around, I will go to length of service range, then also employee ID under values. All of that is summarized. I'll convert this pivot table into a pivot chart, which is my second pivot chart. Then this time around, I'm going to be using a bar chart, not a column chart. And all I need to do is to further customize idle field buttons on charts, take away the totals legend, then rename the chart itself workforce length LOS distribution. So let me just use that as a summary, length of service distribution. Then this time around, I will move this chart to my dashboard. That is the second that's the second pivot chart. Now you see it's starting to form out. Now because I'm going to create this into a single screen, I can reduce all of this. Then I can start to resize in preparation for the other two pivot charts to complete my pivot table. So we have two pivot charts already. We need two more pivot charts. So let's go back to our employee data. Table design, summarize a pivot table, pick existing worksheet because I want all my pivot to be on one single sheet. I scroll down, I pick anywhere I want it to be, and I click that. For this particular one, I want it to show my recruitment sources. So I'll scroll down, recruitment sources into roles, and my employee ID into values. This gives me an idea of how many employees were recruited and which recruitment sources they came for. For this particular one, I'm going to be using a pivot chart, but this time around, I will use a pie chart to show this representation. So I'll click in there, and that's my pivot chart. I will hide all field buttons on charts. I need my recruitment sources, so I'll rename this as workforce recruitment sources. So I'll move this now. I'll move the chart. I'll move the chart. I'll move the chart now to my dashboard. So let's go back to where my pivot table is. So we're done with the first part of the workforce age distribution. I'll move the chart now to my dashboard. So let's go back to where my pivot table is. So I'm going to create a new pivot table that would show the employee length of service distribution. So let me do some further check in terms of size for this. I want it to be somewhere here, and let me change this to okay. So it's there, it's getting ready now. I wanted to show the percentages, so all I need to do is to right click on it. I go to the design for the graph itself, for the pivot chart, and I will pick this particular one. You will notice that all of this is showing now. So my percentages are now showing on the particular graph. I'll still do some further customization. Those are three different pivot charts already. I need just one more pivot chart. Those are three different pivot charts already. I need just one more pivot chart. I'll go back to my employee data. This time around, table design, summarize a pivot table, existing worksheets. Then I go to my pivot table fields and I had the last one. This time around, I want to show the hiring trend, and that will be the hire dates against the employee IDs. I'm going to do some further customization here. I'll come here and I will do some groupings in terms of my data. I do not need the quarter. I only need the month and the year to be shown, and I click OK. And all I need to do now is I would now collapse every part of that. I don't need them to show. So I'll click all and collapse all the various fields. Then all I need to do now is to create a pivot chart for that, and this time around I'm going to be using a line graph. So I will use this with markers and I click OK, and here you have it. I can expand. All I need to do is to hide all field buttons on charts and take away the legend, rename this as hiring trend, workforce hiring trend. So workforce hiring trend, that is ready, and I can move this chart to my dashboard. That's the final part of my dashboard creation process. I close this. There you have it, and I can expand at will as I want, and there you have. Now let me do some further customization. At this point, I'm going to be doing some further customization to fit all of my dashboard in a single screen. So the final part of the dashboard is to add my slicer. So I'll pick on any of the worksheets, pick on any of the pivot charts that you can see, then go to pivot table, pivot chart, analyze, and click on add slicer. So the only slicer I'm going to be adding is the department. So I'll click on the slicer. So the slicer comes in and I can do some further customization. I change it to 3 columns. Let's say 3 columns this time around, and I can resize at will. So here we have it. We're done with our slicer. And all I need to do now is to do the final bit, is to connect the slicer to all of the pivot tables and pivot charts that is on my dashboard. That is the final piece that makes it interactive. So once I'm done, I can test to be sure that that is working. So let me put this in a single screen. Let me hide the auto hide button, and let's see what we can see now. So here you have it. All of that is now connected, and you can tell a data story from here. To be able to say, if we look at finance, for example, all our workforce age are all baby boomers, generation X and generation Y. Then we see the workforce length of service. We see where we recruited all of them from. And most of the people in finance were recruited in 2018. If I go to the production team, which forms a larger percentage of the entire workforce, 148 of the entire workforce, we can see where we recruited them from, and we can notice that in 2010 we had the largest population of production staff that was recruited, and in 2020 as well, we also recruited a couple of the production guy. Overall, you will see that the highest number of hiring that we did in the organization was in 2010 and also in 2017. That is across the entire organization. This is an example of your interactive HR dashboard.